Thanks for joining us for another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share, and all that good stuff. And you can support us as well. I've been seeing several of you guys starting to support us. We appreciate that. Don't forget to support those that support us. We got Resource One and Annie McCollum at 636-458-1798, and CS Design, who does our intro, outro, website, all that good stuff at 573-436-3717. Keep your eyes open over the next month or so. We got the app coming out as well, so a lot of fun stuff we're excited about as we continue to grow. And thank you for also getting us 20,000 subscribers. So continuing to help boost our numbers, and we appreciate that very, very much. Also been noticing a lot of people starting to follow on Spotify. And so if you're a big fan of that, make sure you do that, because we're real close to being able to be monetized there as well. So we appreciate that. That being said, our guest today is somebody I've kind of gotten to know through all sorts of stuff, and today we're actually able to sit down and have a real conversation. She actually has talked to my wife a few times back when you were running for school board, and but today we have Jessica. Now, do you go by Laurent or Clark? I got to ask this question because I've had all sorts of people. I didn't even know how to label the episode here.
Yeah, so Laurent is fine. That's how people know me on the radio. Clark is my legal name, but as far as branding and how people know me, it is Laurent.
Laurent, I don't care. So whatever you prefer to be called, I will go with. So I'm fine with whatever you appreciate. So I'll flow with what you like.
It's just fine.
All right. So, but we got Jessica here today, and you've got this really interesting life. I've been hearing bits and pieces over, and we started talking a little bit before the episode. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're from St. Louis, but tell us where you're from. Give us a little bit about your background and a little bit about your testimony.
Yeah. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. It's been a few months since I've been behind a microphone with somebody else, so I'm like, okay, getting back in the groove. So yes, born and raised in St. Louis. I love it here. It's interesting. So born in St. Louis City, West St. Louis.
What part of West St. Louis when you say that?
Yeah, so on a street called Cabany.
Okay.
Between Delmar and Page, Kings Highway and Union.
Okay.
So my brother went to Soldan. I went to Clark.
I know those well. I used to pick up kids at Soldan.
Yeah. So. Yeah. That's my stomping ground. We still have our family home there. Grew up with my great-grandparents. So I'm the youngest of three. My sister is 5 years older. My brother is 2 years older. My great-grandparents got us. We were 5, 3, and 6 weeks.
Wow.
And they were 67 and 77.
And they raised you, hey?
3 kids under 5, yep.
That's crazy.
Yep. Didn't miss a beat. My mother spent 17 years in prison.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my father, probably 10 years in and out.
Okay.
So
17 years in prison, though.
It's a lot.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that's your whole life.
That is my entire life. So, I have vague memories of her as a child before she went to prison. She dropped us off before all of that. Lots of drugs and things like that with her and my father. So, I think her original charge was armed robbery. Mm. There was a moment where, and you can probably find an article online where she escaped from, it was a small municipality in North County. Kinlock.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was something else. But
the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
It doesn't. Just
in a positive direction, right?
And she always said that. She would always say, "You have the best parts of me." It took me a long time to understand what that meant, and I really didn't get it until after she passed. I'm like, and I would talk to people that she was incarcerated with, and I'm like, she wasn't lying. I do. She had a spirit that was kind. It's just the environment was a little sketchy. So she dropped us off with.
Did she grow up in St. Louis too?
She did. Born and raised in University City.
Okay.
Her and my father. I think they both went to U City. Yeah. So
and he did 10 years, you said.
Yeah, in and out. It wasn't 10 consecutive, but I always remember he was there, and then I remember him being there, being in and out of the house more than she. Hers was that 17 years consecutive, and my father was kind of.
Did you ever establish relationships with them afterwards?
Yeah, that's interesting. So my father, Yes, because when he really he started to lay a foundation from himself, got clean, started working. So I got to see him. He started to build a relationship with my kids. He was doing really well for a while. A few years ago, he did relapse, but he's clean now again. So I'm closer with my father, which I did find out is not my actual father. Found that out recently, so that was mind-boggling. But we're pretty
May not
close
be
now.
surprising though. I mean, given the fact that your mom was a drug user, right? I mean, that kind of goes with the territory down
Yes.
there. I
Yes.
you know,
Yep.
so
Yep. So there was a whole story behind it because I was actually put up for adoption because he wasn't my father, super abusive to my mom. So it's a long story, but we're pretty close. Yeah, I just talked to
okay.
him on Father's Day. Extremely proud of the progress that he's made. Yeah, he's doing really well considering the life that he had.
Yeah.
My mother. So my aunt would take us to see my mother maybe once a year. So we would always go up. She was in Chillicothe, Missouri.
Okay.
We would go up and we would see her. And I thought she was the best. Even though, I mean, children just love their mothers regardless of anything. Like
Right.
her not being there, I didn't understand. And I just loved her. And I couldn't wait until she got home. I thought she was the most beautiful. So she would write us letters and things like that. So she did the best that she could. She always had. I mean, if nothing else, she had a man knocking on our door, dropping us stuff off. It was always somebody different, but she made sure we were good.
Oh, that's good.
When she got out, I just had my second daughter. I had these expectations.
Mm.
Had this vision built up of what it meant to have my mother back, and she couldn't live up to that.
Mm.
So I remember those first few years, and I would call her and be like, "Hey, the girls and I, we want to come by, we want to hang out." And she's like, "I'm busy," or "I'm not in town," and the girls would be sick, and when my mom friends, they would be sick, or the kids would be sick, and their moms would be there to pick them up, and I'm like, man, like I want that. I want my mom to pick up my kids so I don't have to take off work. And there was so much that I wanted from her, and there was this resentment I started to build towards her, and it wasn't good for a long time. But then I started to realize that, you don't even know how this woman became who she is. You're expecting something from her that she may not even have.
Or no. I mean, sometimes we think that they know these things, and you find out. I mean, 17 years in jail. What role model did she have to see as mom? And you don't know how even your grandma. But things have changed. I mean, what a mom was 20 years ago is different than it is today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I went through this process where I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Like, this is killing you. It's destroying you. You got this anger inside of you. Like, how did you become the hot mess that you were?
Mm.
Can you, and then you went through this transformation and understanding, and you loved yourself and you were compassionate and patient with yourself. Can you extend that to her? And so I changed my perspective of, that relationship. And I'm like, okay, I just kind of want to know who you are. I just kind of want to know how you became the person that you are. And so she started telling me these stories her mother was schizophrenic. I mean, one day she was fine and one day she just snapped and was not herself. And so now my mother doesn't have a mother, and she has to be the caretaker for her mother. There was a lot of abuse with family members towards my mother. She didn't have what I needed. Nobody gave her the love that I was expecting her to give me.
Right.
She didn't know how to do that. It's like going to a water fountain and expecting Skittles to pop out and being disappointed every time. It's like, that's not fair.
Right.
And so at that moment, I'm just going to love you where you are. I get it. I get how you became this person. I'm so sorry that you had to live through that. And I'm just going to love you where you are. And so after going through that process, I was able to just kind of talk to her and be there for her. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, I got a call saying, your mother's here. You're listed as her emergency contact. Her liver's completely shot. Like, we've intubated her. She's probably not going to make it. I need you to come and figure it out. So did that. I got to be with her as she passed, and I got to talk with her. And it was important for me to be there to let her know, like, I love you. You didn't fail. Like, she had this thing where she felt like she did fail us and we didn't care about her. And I'm just like, that's not true. And so to be able to transition with her and just kind of let her know, like, if you don't leave this place knowing nothing else, like, you didn't. And I love you and I'm with you. And it was,
Hopefully she saw it through your actions too in those last days.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we always tell people, everybody says I only want one kid and be done. But I go, when you're on your deathbed, you want to be surrounded by your loved ones.
Yeah.
And to be surrounded by someone who's speaking to you and telling you they love you and care about you, those are the things you want to have as you leave this place.
It was incredible. And I got to eulogize her, and I got to remind my siblings that, like, she really loved us the best that she could. Like, her letters, her gifts, like, that was her wanting to be there with us, and she couldn't be. And it was a gift. It was a gift. So, yeah. So she dropped us off at our grandparents. Our grandparents did the best that they could with us. But imagine having 3 kids under 5 at 67 and 77. It was a struggle. So for them, it was, we have to keep these kids fed. You know, they did the best that they could. Every now and then we would have vacations with our extended family, and it was tough. My sister was traumatized. She spent the most time with my parents. So when we talk about environment and investing in those kids early and brain development, like, you can see the difference in the results of my sister spending 5 years with my parents, neglect, abuse, all kind of stuff. My brother spending 3 years, and me only having to be there actually no time, because I went from the hospital to my grandparents' house.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
There's a massive difference in our lives. My sister she's struggling with alcohol addiction. We all struggle with that at some point. She's Section 8, couple of kids. It's just the environment created her, and she didn't get the help she needed. My brother was there for 3 years. He's not quite where she is, but there's a huge difference. And so I'm grateful. I didn't understand why my journey was the way that it was, and now I'm extremely grateful.
Wow.
So my grandparents did the best that they could, but they couldn't pour into us the way that maybe younger parents could. So my grandfather was old, my great-grandfather. I mean, he passed when I was 15, and that was that stage where I needed male validation, and I needed a father, and I needed all of that, and I didn't have it. And so that's where it kind of shifted.
Yeah, you probably saw that in a relationship, right? And so you sought it out. Yeah, that's not an uncommon thing. When you don't have a male presence in your house consistent, even if there's somebody in the house but they're not consistent, and they don't model and build into there, you find a lot of women will go high school, college, go find the first male that gives them attention, shows them the kind of male traits that they think they want. And of course, you don't know, because you don't know really what you're looking for. An interesting thing about people who get married, a lot of times, if you've had both, the son will usually marry somebody who's like his mom.
Yep.
And the daughter will marry somebody like her dad. Doesn't mean they're going to be spitting images, but there'll be traits that are very similar. Yeah.
That's what I did. So with my marriage, my relationship mirrored my grandparents. My grandmother, she was a savage. Like, she ran the show. Like, everything, she was very masculine. My grandfather was very passive, very quiet. He just kind of let her do her thing. My ex-husband, same. I mean, even our birthdays were similar. Like, he was born in December. My grandfather was born in December. My grandmother's October. I'm October. Like,
wow.
It was, I repeated what I saw. It was wild to think about. And so, they did the best that they could. But at that pivotal moment, and we'll talk about that later, because that looking at the dynamic of my family is part of the reason I'm so passionate about politics or culture, or Black culture and things like that, because there are some things, not even just Black culture in general, when we talk about fatherlessness and the impact and what that looks like on teen pregnancy and the dropout rate and drugs and incarceration. Like, it's huge. Oh,
it is. It's the number one epidemic in our country.
Yes.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand how, like, all the social programs were designed around that.
To that now.
And we can, and then you go down to how it became a mainstay in America. We had no fault divorce, another thing, and then all that leads to today, where we have record amount of divorces, record amount of kids with only one parent. We had a episode a while back called Wild at Heart, where we were talking about the masculinity issue in America, and no wonder. Little boys want to be girls now, because there's not masculine men showing them, we need more licenses because men aren't taking their sons out to go learn how to hunt, how to fish, how to, do the things that we used to learn from our dads or our
The
grandfathers.
things we're designed to do intrinsically as as men. You're the hunters, you're the
Yeah.
protectors, you're the providers. Like those are things. You have testosterone and it needs to be managed. You need to know how to manage that. And your father is you're supposed to be roughhousing. I'm gonna wrestle. We're gonna get that aggression out. Like
Yeah, exactly. I do have my boys all the time. We get into wrestling things, and they're so much more aggressive than girls, right? I mean,
yes.
I've got 4 girls, 2 boys. My older 4 girls, and all princesses. But my boys, first holes in the house and all the stuff like that. I mean, they just, they're constantly at each other.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
But you
man.
balance it out with allowing them to get that out at home in a safe space where they're not out fighting or beating up women or because at home we can get that out and we can manage it. Like there's so much missing. So we talked about the welfare system. So 15, I'm out. My grandparents are, they're home, they're old, they're asleep. I'm in the streets. Like
Okay.
I meet this guy. He's 21. I'm 15.
Wow.
Yeah, already bad news. Bad news. I'm like, you don't realize it. And I mean, a lot of that I didn't realize until I have a 15-year-old daughter now, and I'm like imagine, like
No, I can't. I got a 15-year-old too, and I
I'm going to prison if any of those scenarios pop up like they did in my life. Like I'm shooting first, ask question later. Like so at 15, like I'm so vulnerable and I'm so naive, and so I'm ripe for the picking and didn't even realize it. So meet this 21-year-old. We start this relationship. 16, I'm pregnant. 15, I'm pregnant.
Wow.
Had an abortion. 17, pregnant again. That's my 15-year-old daughter.
Okay.
So lots of abuse. I mean,
Mind if I ask something on the abortion? Is that something that you look back now and regret?
oh yeah.
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 Yeah. Did it kind of play with you initially?
No, because my grandmother was very much a woman who it's more about how it looked.
Okay.
So we can't have this.
Oh, so they were the ones that maybe even helped.
My grandmother, she took me.
Wow. Okay.
And she took me out to dinner after, like
Like it was no big deal.
Was no big deal. So when you don't realize what you just did, you don't have an emotional attachment to it. So when you look at the abortion culture now, because that's what it is, it's a culture.
Right.
A lot of these women don't understand what is actually happening.
Yeah, I would usually remember, I obviously not something I've dealt with maybe firsthand, but as a youth pastor in a city, I had many trips to good old Forest Park. I mean, we all know the corner that it was on, the medical thing that was at the bottom, and I would, this is in the 90s, I would occasionally have to pick up, I get a call, Pastor Josh, I'm bleeding, I can't go on a bus.
Yeah.
They didn't, they go in or not realizing they would come out with sometimes collateral damage. A few times had to take some to the hospital, and I grew up in the country, and that was so far from my mind.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I was really in a city and saw the convenience level, the culture of it. But I also saw probably maybe 2 out of 3 girls. It really bothered afterwards. I mean, usually part of it, I'm sure, was the fact of the bleeding and the other things that maybe came with it. But I definitely noticed afterwards that this remorse, and every single one of them eventually would be remorseful.
Yeah.
Like there would be this thought later on, like, man, I did something.
Yeah.
It's not like, throwing away a piece of trash.
Yeah.
So
the way my grandmother, like, it was just like, we're just going to go eat and we're not going to talk about this again. And nobody knew until I brought it up later, telling my story. My siblings, nobody knew.
Wow.
I could have just swept it under the rug, but it was important for me to kind of talk about that journey and like what really happened. She kept everything squeaky clean. All our dirt was swept under the rug.
That's not uncommon either. I mean, that's
it's very common.
Very common. Most families don't want controversy. They don't. Everybody wants to look a certain way.
Yeah.
So.
Which in retrospect, I'm thinking, because I would talk to my aunt years later, and she's like, I had no idea you guys were going through so much. Like I wish she would have opened up, because part of my family had a lot of resources. And she's like, I could have been there. I could have. So that, like now when I'm going through something, I'm bringing community in. It's like, I need you. Like, I'm not ashamed of this. This is such as life things happen. I'm not sure how God wants to mold me and what kind of struggles he's going to give me to get me to who I need to be. But in the process, like, it's community. Like, I need,
When you were down there with your grandparents, were you guys spiritual at all? Was there church involved?
My great grandmother was Catholic.
Okay.
My grandmother lived with us too.
Okay.
Their daughter, she was a church hopper. Oh, she loved to church hop. So, I mean, she carried her Bible, she quoted scripture, but she was not a nice person.
Gotcha.
So it didn't seem appetizing. I want nothing to do with that. I did start going to church. My neighbor was my piano teacher. She was Lutheran. So I would play at the Lutheran church.
Okay.
I would go, and I was a big part of the Lutheran church. I went to Lutheran high school. I went to Lutheran North.
Saw that, yeah.
Yep.
So you were being introduced to spiritual parts along the way. God
Yes.
was already planting seeds as a young person.
Yeah, I was baptized at 13. I remember that. But there was some drama in the church.
Well, yeah, it's built with people.
People.
Yeah, and so anytime you got people, there's going to be some drama, and there's always going to. I think the promise is people expect to go to church, and it's going to be this perfectly harmonious place. And I always tell people that's called heaven.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Church is like a broken piece of heaven. Like there's some good things about it where we help each other out, but there's all the stuff you see in the world that doesn't just leave.
Yeah.
People bring that inside. If they're a backstabber in the world, they're probably a backstabber at church.
Yeah.
If they're mismanaging money in the world, they're probably mismanaging at church.
Yeah.
And the difference is people do things and mask things up in a different way.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, maybe they have an addiction one way over here, and then they just move that addiction maybe a little bit differently over here.
So as a 15-year-old, because all of this happened, it's like one after the next. Like between 15 and like 22, it was just like, what is this? So being in the church, I'm in the Lutheran church, I'm playing the piano, I'm reading the scripture, I'm babysitting for a really nice couple. They got a kid, and they would pick me up and take me to their house, and it was all good, and their son was great, and he loved me, and I'm loving this because you don't see that. You didn't see that in our community, like where, you got a little job and you're babysitting. It was good. They would take me to hockey games with them. It was great until the husband started teaching me to drive. And again, I'm naive. I don't understand why you keep complimenting me this way. I don't understand. I know this is a stick shift, but your hand is on my hand, and one thing led to another. And, this man's paying me for sex. I'm 15. And that's in the church. So that was my foundation of the church. There was just this foundation of mistrust, but I was so young and naive, and I started associating my value with my body. I got this older man who, is of course taking advantage of me. That's statutory rape, which you don't think about it because you're 15. I got this other older man also doing the same thing. And I, as a 15-year-old, just like, oh, look at me. Like they want me because I'm mature. It's like you're not. You're vulnerable and you're a victim and you don't even realize it. So, that foundation was laid early. And so, 15, abortion, 17 pregnant, had my daughter. Her dad was extremely abusive. Physically abusive, emotionally abusive, everything that you can think of. This man held me hostage for 2 days in a hotel room, like Natural Bridge and Kings Highway. There's this like real ghetto motel. You'll pass it. Everybody knows it.
I know exactly what you want to talk about. Yeah.
2 days. Had me. My daughter was there. beating the crap out of me in front of her. And she's witnessing this. Finally, he just was like, y'all can go. I got back home. I'm probably 18. Got back home, and I walked in the door, and as I was walking in, my mom was calling from prison.
Oh.
She's calling. I'm telling her what happened. Within 5 hours, there was this small white guy at my door from Kansas City with 2 other guys with guns. They're like, just tell me where he is. It's like, just... Your mom told us what happened, and it won't happen again. You just tell me where he is. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. This man had nearly destroyed me, and I couldn't do it.
Right.
Couldn't do it. So I ended up it was a really rough time. I mean, I got back home. My family said this was your fault. Like you asked for this. Like there was no comfort. There was no. And the case got thrown out because I lied about it. They made me feel so bad. They were like, "Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you?" And I'm like, "He had a gun," which he didn't. But that just felt like the safe thing to say because you're making me feel like
Yeah.
you should have left. And I'm like, no, this man was holding my daughter over the sink with a radio saying, if you don't do what I say, I'm killing her. And for me, that's good enough, but it wasn't good enough for them. So this man got off scot-free because my family made it seem like it was my fault. So I ended up going to Kansas City because I was dealing with some PTSD. Like I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to. It was rough. And even that, like, there was just so much mistrust. This man, he was like, we're going to put you in school up here. This was my mom's friend. They used to be pen pals. He was a big drug lord in Kansas City. They met as pen pals in prison. They're both in prison.
Oh, that's funny.
Isn't that crazy? So he's like, we're going to get you a nursing school, all of this school. Good. I'm like, yes, we're doing this. He takes me back home, never comes back. Turns out he's a cross-dresser and didn't want me to come live with him because then my mom would find out. I'm just like, this is wild. No way this is real.
No.
So I go, what do you do when you're 17, 18 with a baby? You go get on welfare. I remember my first trip to the welfare office. They gave me everything I wanted. They gave me daycare and housing and food stamps and medical and all. I'm like, this is nice. Like, it was good. And so I have to laugh about it because I remember going back after I was married. And my ex-husband, my husband at the time, he got diagnosed with leukemia. We went through cancer, lost everything, had to rebuild, and we're back at the welfare office. This is after having my second child and all of that. And I'm trying. I'm like, we in a church, we married, like.
You're doing all the things you thought you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Go back to the welfare office. I mean, we lost everything. He lost his company. We had to liquidate everything so he can get the proper health care and everything. We starting over. Like, we just need a little help. Like, let's go back. Because I'm like, these people going to give us everything. Like, I've been there. I know. Like, I remember going and sitting there and the lady's just going through the numbers and, how much rent do you pay and what are you doing? She's like, oh, you pay $700 of rent. Like, you don't have to pay that much. Like, oh, you guys are both students. Like, one of y'all can work. Like, I mean, she made us feel so bad. They didn't give us anything. They told us one of us needs to go back to work. We can live somewhere that didn't and we weren't. We were living on a state street in South City. Like, it wasn't like, we were living in Ladue. Like, yeah. And so, and that was the moment that I'm like, it's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with this system. Because how is it that two people who have a legitimate reason for being here, like, we lost everything to cancer. We had no control over that. Like, I had control over laying down with this man and having a baby.
Yeah.
I couldn't control this man getting cancer and us losing everything. But the fact that there's two of us and we're married and we're trying to make sure our kids are educated and we've got a solid foundation, we're trying to educate ourselves, like, there's no value in that. Like, what is this system made for?
Yeah.
So that kind of planted that seed, but I was kind of young and didn't think twice about it. I just thought, okay, this kind of messed up. Like, I don't understand. I was just confused. And I remember having a conversation with somebody saying, the welfare system is bad for Black people. It's bad for people in general. Like, this feels like modern day slavery. And then, we started talking about politics, which I was never really into politics, but we just shared.
How old were you?
I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And I'm like, I'm repeating what I've heard. I'm like, this has to be a Republican structure. It's got to be, because they're the racist ones, right? And no way, it has to be them, because look what it's doing to the community. Of course, the racists are it's genius. Like, you guys are genius. That's what I was thinking. We're having this conversation. I had no idea. It was the opposite of everything I could have imagined.
Yeah, but that's the great lie, right? I mean, that's the great lie since the 60s, is that somehow the belief that Democrats were the ones who freed you from the South, that they're the ones who have taken care of all your problems.
Man,
and
the
any
greatest
historic
lie ever told.
It really is. And the media just lathers it up as much as they can and runs with it.
Yeah, it's like, as long as nobody gets too loud about it, we'll just kind of hide it. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean and I think the disclaimer is that doesn't mean the Republicans are clean.
Facts.
So there is absolutely, we had these conversations a little bit earlier, but on both sides of the party, they could fix a lot of this, but the problem is when power gets involved and money gets involved on both sides, then corruption is just rampant, right? So the only way to start to control that is to ramp it down and get more local, because then the more local you get, the more control, or at least then you can limit the damage, right?
Yeah.
So
All people, we all a hot mess. But that was those ideas and those narratives is what drives people when they're voting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because no way I'm voting for somebody that I think is out to get me personally, in my family, my community. So it was those narratives that we have to address. But yeah, we never talked about politics. My grandfather was, he was a school teacher, and he, he was running the block unit and things like that. So he was involved in the community, but I was too young to really understand that. But we didn't talk about politics. Yeah. When I voted Democrat, because that's what, those are all the signs in the neighborhood. That's like, I do whatever y'all just told me to do. Like, good.
I show up, I do my American thing, I vote. It's just D down the side, and I'm good to go.
Question it. Yeah, I never questioned it until a few years ago. As an older woman. Like, I was dating this man, and we started talking about Trump, and I'm just rolling my eyes. I'm like, I know this man is not going there with me. Like, don't do that. Like, we're not doing that. But whatever. I listened, because you get a man around, you just you get kind of crazy. Those hormones start raging. I'm listening to whatever. I got that confirmation. That little halo bias happening. So he's talking to me, and I'm just like, whatever. And so he started like showing me different videos about Donald Trump and his body language, and just he showed, what was that? What was the show he had?
The Apprentice?
The Apprentice. And I was into it, and I liked it. And I'm like, this man is kind of witty, kind of funny. Like, there was
and there was a lot of African Americans on it, right? You had Lil Wayne and all these different, Dennis Rodman. And all of them are his friends.
Yes. So watching that, it was like, wait a minute. So he's kind of witty. These black people like him. Like, so is he a raging racist, or is he something like what I'm seeing in this show? And so that kind of planted a seed of doubt. And when you get that one seed of doubt, it's like, oh no, wait, I got to question everything now. And so I just started doing my own research and started kind of looking at his campaign and, what one side of the media was saying and what the other side, and trying to find a balance in that. I'm like, wait, these people are lying. They took that out of context. They took this one clip and made it sound like something else, and that's not even what he said. And so, I mean, the level of distrust, like, I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
There is no way I've been walking around drinking the Kool-Aid like this. There is no way I missed this. And so it kind of opened me up to like, wait, you might be wrong. You might be wrong. Cause I drank the Kool-Aid. Like, I'm talking about liberal, crazy. I'm talking about I would go into work late, do the bare minimum, and then call my boss a racist cause she called me out on it. Yeah. Like, I was that girl. Like, I was using it to my advantage cause it feels good.
Well, and it's easy.
It's easy.
It's easy.
It's easy. It's easy. It's easier to call you a racist than show up to work on time.
Absolutely. and what are they going to do?
What you going to do?
That's like the one thing nobody wants to hear, because if you're told that, then you are like, it makes everybody uncomfortable.
It's like being called a pedophile.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's the weight of it nowadays. It's like being called a pedophile. So, and I would use it. And so, I mean, that's how far gone I was.
I also think it's funny because if you started watching the election with Joe, I mean, obviously this is during the 2016 one with Clinton, right?
Yeah.
But I even thought when this last election with Joe Biden and Trump, when they were running, the idea of when you hear Trump talk and then you would hear Biden, and Biden would, you ain't black unless you vote Democrat, or these little things that he would drop, and you're sitting there going, that's really racism.
It definitely is.
You're telling people,
stereotypes, all kinds. So there's a guy who does like a man on the street, and he'll go with these quotes and be like, "Is this racist?" And everybody, all these liberals, like, "Oh yeah, that's absolutely racist." And I'd be like, who said that? Was it Trump or was it Biden? They'd be like, "That was definitely Trump." Like, it wasn't. That was your boy. That was your boy. Like, and they're like, "Oh, now I, it kind of planted that seed of doubt." Like. Yeah. So after when that happened, like, I started consuming just all kind of information. I read Candace Owens' book Blackout, and I mean, she just she laid it all out.
She does that's a great book.
Oh man, like she gave me the history that I needed. She opened my mind and it's just like,
Get off the black plantation,
for
right?
real.
So
I mean, I was on fire. That's what got me to where I am now. Cause I'm like, everybody needs to know this. How do we not know this? How are we not having these conversations? How? How do we get here? Yeah, yeah. So here I am.
yeah.
Like the truth will set you free for real. Like that's real. And once I was exposed to just a small amount of the truth, I'm like, yeah, we doing this. Like,
So you have two kids. You're in an abusive relationship. How does that turn into your marriage? And obviously you're going to get married. So I kind of want to rewind just a little bit to kind of fill in some gaps between there.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So had my oldest daughter.
mm-hmm.
Finally got out of that situation with her dad, and then I met my husband.
Okay.
Super nice guy. He's a saint. I met him. I got lost on the highway, and this black man shows up in this big F-350 dually truck with a dog and a four-wheeler, and I thought I was being punked because you don't see that cowboy hat, cowboy boots. So I met him, and he was just very kind to me. And he poured into me in a way that I needed. So we had we got married, and he ended up getting diagnosed with cancer, and all of that. So we had a pretty decent marriage, and we tried. It didn't work out, but
So and then you get divorced, and during that time, is this when you're moving out towards West County, or?
Yeah. So I started dating another guy. We both had, he lost his wife to cancer. He's got his daughters. I've got my daughters, and so he was the one that really brought me to this portion. Like, he was brave enough to have these conversations with me and supported me through my campaign. And it was, I mean, when I think about how beautifully God placed people, yeah.
And how about your trust in God? Kind of your testimony, because you said, hey, I was, doing stuff at church. Obviously, you got this period where a lot of stuff was going on. Where does that move from, this distrust of church and trust in men to, where you are right now on your faith?
Yeah, it's been up and down. Oh, it's been back and forth. So, when I was younger, my trust has been broken so many times in the church with men of faith. And so that was, men in general, but men of faith. There were several pastors that would approach me on things. I'm just like, I didn't think this was this kind of place. Like, if this is what happens in the church, I might as well go to the street, because I know how to maneuver out there. So when my husband and I were married, we were in the church. I had a ministry. It was called New Women in Christ. We were pretty big in the church. There were some things that happened, and people approaching me with different things. And I'm like, I can't do this. This is not what I signed up for. And after it happening so many times, it's just like, I don't know if this whole Christian thing is for me. It really pushed me out, and I left the church for years. And it wasn't until maybe a few years ago that, as I started opening up to conservatism, and a lot of our conservative brothers and sisters are Christians. And so, I start seeing God move, and he starts slowly bringing me back in different ways. It's like, hey, I'm still here. Like, I know you were gone. I'm still here. And there are moments, like the last few years were so rough that it's just like, I can't do this by myself. You're going to have to go and surrender. You're going to have to. God took me to the point where it's like, it's either me and you, or it's nobody. Like, you're not going to survive this without me. Like, really, some depression and like some suicidal thoughts, and my daughter attempted suicide. Like, it was like, no, I'm going to take everything from you. You want to play? So the last few years, it's just been God just showing up just with little reminders. I'm here, little miracles here and there. Even the whole board race. I'm like, listen, God, I've never done this. I just got here. I don't even feel like I'm qualified to sit in this seat. But if this is what you want, I'll suffer. I will let them drag me through the mud, whatever. You want me there, put me there. And there is nothing I can do on my own to get me there.
Yeah.
And I surrendered, and here I am. And I have to walk with him every day, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you tell me what I need to know. You tell me. So it's just been up and down, but right now my faith is as strong as it's ever been.
I think it's if anybody's being honest, I mean, your faith is always growing, right?
Yeah.
And when you're growing, that means you're going to have those up and downs because
Yeah.
sometimes God feels really close and
Yeah.
sometimes He doesn't.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean He's left. It's just our emotions and how we are how we're handling it.
Yes.
So I understand that very much. On the school board, that how did that come? How did you wind up making that decision to run? Was it just, you saw what was going on and you said, I feel like God's calling me to jump into this gap? Or was it like, change has to be made. I'm going to be that person or?
So yeah, I saw everything that was happening, and I realized that seeing all the cancel culture, the toxicity of the environment, people were afraid.
Mm.
People were afraid to run. People were afraid. It takes like, you got to have a certain kind of grit, especially in our area, like to do this. And it's like, I can. Like, I've prepared for this kind of trial. Like, you
got to have a little thick skin because,
do.
they're, especially if you're not the NEA's person.
Yes.
If you're not their person, you got to have thick skin because
Yes.
they're going to come at you, guns blazing. They got the money, they got the endorsements,
They do.
and
So
money influences.
I'm like, okay, God, like, what we doing? Like, you tell me, because I'd been approached by other people saying you should do it, you should do it. I'm like, nah, I don't, because again, a lot of fear. Like, I'm new out here, I'm young. Like, I'm just opening my eyes to everything that's happening. Like, I'm like a baby. Like, I'm new to the party. Can I do this? And God's like, yeah, I'm gonna show you, like, the chaos through the campaigning. Like, God's just like, no, don't worry about those people. I mean, I had, entire groups of people drop me, take the funding, like everything. Everything you can think could go wrong on my campaign went wrong on my campaign. And still sit there.
Yeah, you did
Yeah.
good. And during this time, when did you start the radio? Is that about the same time that you started the radio?
That was before.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you'd already kind of gotten a conservative radio at that time.
Yep.
And so not only were you newly conservative trying to take this information that you're now dissecting and trying to get it out to the masses, because you're like, hey, man, somebody's got to be saying this.
Yes.
And might as well be me. And then you have the school board, and you're like, somebody's got to make a change. Might as well be me.
Do it.
Okay.
Yeah, it just it worked, and it's bigger than me.
Mm.
It's so much bigger than me. Like, I feel like I'm just the vessel. Like, I don't know what the change looks like, but I know there are parents who can't sit where I sit. They don't have the courage and the faith to sit in that. So for me, I'm that person for them. I just surrender every time I step in that room. I just surrender. And there are moments where I'm like, I can't do this. Should I be doing this? And I ask that every time I step in there. When you want me to stop doing this, because it's not for show. Yeah, it looks good. It sounds good. People think, oh, you're on the school board. No, this is God's work. And the moment that He tell me that's not the work that He wants me to do, I'm done.
And you were talking about the sacrifice you made to do this work because you had to give up the radio.
Yeah.
It was bringing a lot of controversy and getting in the way of you getting the work done.
Yes.
And so you moved on from that because you just feel this calling so strongly, which I think is awesome because again, we gotta stick up for our kids.
Yes.
And the only way to do is get involved.
Yes.
Everybody has a part to play, whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's being a school board member, whether it's getting involved with the PTO, putting notes out so people who can't maybe be at those things understand. I know my wife puts a lot of notes out and does a lot behind the scenes so people can see, the highlights, what's going on at the county meetings and the school board meetings. And, everybody has a part to play.
They do.
If you're sitting along the sidelines and you're thinking, I could never do that. Well, maybe you're not designed for that, but you're designed for something.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because my goal, like, I don't want to fight. I'm not here to fight. I wanted to bring balance. I wanted to bring a new perspective. In the political arena, there's a lot of talk about, the idea of what it means to be Black or what the Black community needs. And the conversation for me was always one-sided. And it's like, if we're pouring money into this and we're putting this into lesson plans and can you have somebody on there that can bring a a actual, the real life to it and a different perspective. Like, it needed to be balanced. The conversation. It's not that I want to fight. It's not that I think, you're a horrible person or people are wrong. No, there needs to be balance and there needs to be a diverse conversation. We want to talk about diversity, then we have to have a diversity of thought, not just some brown bodies sprinkled in. We have to have a diversity of thought and perspective and background.
They didn't even have the brown bodies.
They didn't. But a lot of people, that's when they hear diversity, that's what it is we look like.
Yeah, the skin. They go with the skin and not diversity of thought.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's not. It's not that because my skin. I got more melanin, but it's more my experience. It's more of I lived the life that you are reading books about, that you're trying to teach about from somebody who hasn't done it. So when you start creating these ideas based on the life you didn't live or one person's lived experience, like there's more than that.
It kind of reminds you a little bit of the Me Park story. Do you know who she is?
No.
Oh my goodness!
Come on, listen.
I'll give you a little bit here because we don't. She'd be like one of my dream people to have on her sometime, just because I listened to her and I'm like, wow. So she was born in North Korea, and escaped with her mom. Basically, winds up getting down herself, or not her mom, to South Korea, and eventually to America, and then she goes to college. Okay. And while she's in college, she has a class, and it's one of the top, I think it's Columbia College, one of those top universities. Anyway, she's at this college, and they start talking about communism, and she's sitting there going, and they're talking about like North Korea and China, and she's like, raises her hand and says, that's not how it is. I've been in both of those countries. Yeah. I was born in North Korea, had to go through China and eventually get out of China. And we're talking years, right? Like she spent, grew up in North Korea. I think she ran away when she was like 14 or 15. Got to South Korea, I think around 17 or 18. So she spent 2 or 3 years in China. Pretty good picture of how the whole, and the professor told her she was wrong. They wanted to expel her. She wound up having to sue the university, wrote a book about it. So, and her experience, and so but it reminds me of what you're saying. Like, hey, you get all these people writing books, and they're not even And the people who have lived it and know it, the society has this way of dismissing it. It's like, no, we already know what that's like because we got somebody else who's already wrote about it.
Right, and if they're going to highlight the people that are willing to validate their side of the story. My story doesn't sound so. When I come in and I start, you want to talk about post-traumatic slavery disorder. Did you know that was a thing?
No.
Post-traumatic slavery disorder
In today's world?
Yes.
Right here in America?
Yes.
You seen some slaves?
We suffering because of the slavery and the lineage and what it did to our genetics and I'm like, okay, cool. Let's hold that. If you are down with the fact that because our ancestors were slaves, that it's in our DNA and it changed our DNA and that's why we suffer. Okay, we're gonna rock with that. We're gonna run with it. That means you believe in epigenetics. That means that you believe that environment is going to alter your DNA and it alters who you are. So why are you okay with continuing to create negative environments for your kids if you think environment is so important and it has so much power, but you still create environment. So either way, if you want to go that way, we can have that conversation. But I'm not buying it because until we start talking about fatherlessness, until we start talking about the welfare system, I don't want to hear about slavery because 100 years after slavery, Black people were doing much better than we were 30 years after welfare.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because most people have never studied the welfare system. I think Candace really does a great job of breaking down that in a couple of her episodes that she's done. I'm trying to remember if I think she addresses that in her book. Been a while since I've read the Blackout, but I do know that she definitely talks about that because coming out of the 60s, a lot of that was built around fatherlessness.
Yes. You took the man out of the home and the government became the daddy and the husband.
And it was intentional. The Democrats did that very intentional to keep you guys from. So most people don't understand that the reason that abortion became such a big thing to the Black community was intentional. Planned Parenthood was started as a place for euthanasia.
Yes.
So it was started by a racist. She was a KKK member.
Yeah. And was very open about it.
Well, very. I've got quotes. When I show people, I'm like, you want to see the founder? And I'll pull up this and I'll show quotes from her and her picture with KKK. And they're like, no. And I'll be like, yeah.
Yeah, and we marching with them, and we outside, and we advocating, and this is healthcare, this is women's rights.
And they didn't disavow her until around 2000, what was it, 20 or 19? I mean, you're thinking, yeah, and it was a very weak one at that.
Yeah.
So, like, Like that's how this all started. And then slowly after that, the welfare. Well, we get dads out of the picture. The idea was, A, to make them dependent upon the government, but the other thing was that they thought initially that would keep the population from growing. Again, a lot of this was population control.
Yeah.
They were trying to control the African American community because they didn't want them to grow.
Yeah.
And to some degree, they did that for a long time. I mean, here we are today, and African Americans are somewhere between 12 and 15%. Had fathers been in the homes, things that operated the way they were, who knows where they could be. And you look at other communities, Japanese, we were talking Bosnians. There's been other Hispanics who've come over from other places or had travesties happen. But none of them have had the same struggle of moving forward 50 years later, and you don't hear too many of them still clinging to the issues of 50 years. You don't hear a lot of Jews going, well, because of the Holocaust, I'm not successful today.
You don't.
Or Japanese going, because my grandfather was in a camp in California.
You don't. You don't hear that, and you don't see a group who has been freed or given economic stability through the government, through a handout.
No, it's through education and family.
Yeah, you don't see anybody running around talking about reparations.
No.
It's insane that we having this conversation about reparations.
Well, it's insane, but I mean, if you're trying to control a population, when you take a step back, just like with the World Economic Forum, when you hear people talking about it, and I go, that makes all the sense in the world. Just take a step back and think about it. Hey, if the elites can be in a club together and start doing things, why wouldn't you?
True.
Right?
Yeah.
What does that do? I mean, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It just gives them more power and power and power. They're all getting power. Yeah, eventually somebody's going to have to be at the head of the table.
Yeah.
And they each think it's going to be them.
Yeah.
But until then, we'll all, we'll join hands for the cause, and then we'll turn on each other down the road,
Yeah.
So it's same story played over and over and over. You study history, you'll study that. I mean, in the same things that they did to some degree with the African Americans, they also did with the American Indians. And it's another reason why they've, my ancestral lineage through American Indians. You study them, and Trail of Tears. They get land. Their land's removed. They're given different land. They're shuffled around. Put on social programs, and they're another population that, unless they leave the reservation and join white America, basically, have struggled as a culture. So they're the other one that's kind of out there that we still, not in the conversation, but if you study history, they're very similar in how they were treated and with social programs. And there's a reason why they haven't at the reservations for the most part, unless they have casinos. Really do really well.
It's fascinating that you see it. You see the impact.
We got to take a step back. You got to take a step back and look at the picture.
Yep.
And always ask, where's the money and what's the motive?
Yeah.
Money and motive will lead you down a lot of, you look at like Ukraine wars, always ask, where's the money and what's the motive?
Yep. So we gotta, it's like at this point, what do we do? Like, what do we do? How do we move forward? It's definitely not the whole, DEI initiative or like talking about slavery or things like that. Like for me, I'm like tie the welfare system to the education system. You got to have a certain GPA. You got to show up at school a certain number of days. If you tie that to those parents' funding and food and everything that they're getting for these kids that they're not taking care of.
Well, encourage parents to stay together.
That part.
I think it starts with mentoring. Men need to step up and mentor young men.
Yes.
Okay. And as a Christian, we call that discipleship. So, you can do that multiple ways. Like last night, I was doing middle school boys, youth group. Tomorrow morning, I'll meet with a young man in his late 20s. Probably going to get married here shortly, but I have another guy who is a little bit farther along, married, and we're going to start discipling here in a few weeks. So, I think we got to have men building into younger men, and then what I tell them is, I'll walk with you for 2 or 3 years. And then I need you to do what I'm helping you with somebody behind you.
God.
You go find somebody behind you and you invest in that. Spend 2 or 3 years, come up with a way to help a young man or a young boy grow up and, I have my set of books that I like to use, dealing with masculinity, dealing with what are good moral standards. If we start putting those in there, and ask, how do we fix education, or a lot of it starts with, you just got to get back to some moral absolutes, right?
Yes.
I mean, whether you're let's say, quote unquote, Christian, the Ten Commandments are the basis of all great government.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not steal. I mean, these things seem like they're
it's
pretty
not even.
common
It's
sense.
not about religion or anything like that. Like that's
They were
just,
basic tenets given on the Mount, and if you study world religions, and a lot of good governments have all been built off of that. It's the reason why we had it in our courthouses for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And it really shouldn't be controversial. When those things become controversial, that's a problem.
Yes.
Okay, that should have been sign one that America was going through a huge decay, was when we had problems with the Ten Commandments being in the courtyard hall. Because, that should be very common. You do court, you should want people who are going to be jurors, who aren't going to lie, who are going to be fair, right? Treat their neighbor as themselves and not covet their neighbor.
Yes.
You look at those, and those are the kind of people you want to be judging you at a trial. Those kind of characteristics.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people that you leave your kids with, those characteristics.
Yep.
You want people who are honest and with integrity, So, it just goes back to, I think that's the first foundation. The second one is get the government farther out. The more we look for programs to fix things versus people.
Yep.
Programs are crutches that tend to never fix the problem. I think the other thing we got to get better at too is we got to stop looking at the outward problem and look at what's going on the inward side. I mean, we're seeing it now with a lot of emotional instabilities.
Yes.
Right? We got all sorts of kids, we got all sorts of emotional issues, and versus saying, Peter, that's not normal, but let's find out why you're feeling that way.
Yes. That's a symptom of a problem.
Yeah, let's find out what's going on. Oh, Peter, your dad left? Okay. Man, that's terrible. Man, Peter, you're a young man, 11 years old, and I get why you'd be a little confused if your picture of a man is gone.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, what can we do to help with that? I'd be glad to spend some time with you. Me and my boys, why don't you come hang out with us?
Yeah.
We'd love to have you. You're the same age as a couple of my kids. Why don't you come hang out? Or, and it can be further along. I still find, as I said, young men, 20s and 30s that come out and they start to realize, man, everything I'm doing is wrong. Because I often say that, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We're talking about how you and your mom, right?
Yeah.
But as much as that became good for you, it easily could have been the other way.
Oh, absolutely. And it was for a while.
Yeah, and I see that in guys where they'll grow up and their dad was maybe verbally abusive, and that's the way they treat their wife or their spouse, and they don't understand that that's wrong. And then when it finally blows up in their face and their wife or spouse is like, "I'm going to leave you," then they're like,
I don't understand.
Right? How do I deal with this?
And my father said he loved my mom, and he put his hands on her. Like that's love, right? I love you.
Yeah.
I really do.
Well, I was just blowing up.
Yeah.
That was just me releasing energy. I mean, and understanding, how to deal with all the dynamics in a marriage relationship, in a fatherly relationship.
Yeah.
And those take good modeling. And I think that, we just need to be better at mentoring and developing and discipling young men and women doing women.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it balances itself out. If men are stepping into their masculinity, then the damage that was done when women had to become both the mother and the father, we can start healing that, because women are supposed to be feminine and nurturing and things. But when you take the man out, now I have to hustle and I got to provide and I got to protect. I can't nurture. I can't provide emotional stability. I can't balance the emotions. I can't make a home, because I have to do both roles. So it's a balance for both of us. The men start owning that masculinity and the women can go back to being women.
Yeah. By the time this episode airs, an episode we did a couple of days ago will be out there, and he was from Kenya, and he was talking about, these young girls that would be at these schools. They were the orphans and stuff like that. And then they would start to have their monthlies, and they would start to go out and find somebody to help them out. And usually the men would be like, I'll get that stuff for you. But then they'd wind up sleeping with them and then leave them pregnant. And how their mission organization came in and started providing that for all these girls. And now there's like nobody getting pregnant.
Yeah.
And it just goes, and I'm bringing that to here is just because it just shows that human nature is human nature. And maybe sometimes the best way to handle it is just, to see the issue and address the issue. He saw an issue, simple solution through his mission, and now took care of it. And it, we want to, again, model. I tell this to parents too. I mean, I've been at the gym before where I'll be working out and there'll be this mom and there'll be this girl working out right next to him, right? It's her daughter. And I'm looking at both of them, and I'm embarrassed for both of them because their asses are hanging out. I'm sitting there working out cardio, and I'm looking up, and I'm seeing the the bottoms of their butts hanging out of their shorts, and I'm going, "This is not, this is not attractive for either one of you." And it's really, I feel like, like you talk about pedophile, I feel gross because your daughter's like 14 years old, and I shouldn't be seeing this. This is not okay.
Yes, and
this is inappropriate. And how do we model that for moms to model it to their daughters, to model it? Because a lot of that I find is, my mom, either an act of rebellion. My mom was, I'm not going to lie, my mom was so truthful, I'm not going to be anywhere near that. Right. Or it's a trait that's taught.
Yes. And so getting back to having some kind of standard. Yeah. When you're making men into men that are respectable and they want a partner that also reflects that. When we stop condoning it, when we stop, making it acceptable and it's cute and that's what we want, like society as a whole, like we gotta
change it.
We gotta change it. We gotta stop buying into it and making it like that's what you want to be. And of course, social media throws a whole different aspect.
Well, everywhere. Social media in general. I mean, that's, the promotion of today is, I call it humanistic, which it ties into a little bit of Marxism, but it's very much, think of the slogans you see today. Just do it. Be your own. You're empowered. You just go down any school hallway essay, you'll see. And if you really took a look back, it's all about you. You can do this. You have the ability to do it. And it takes out the fact that we need a higher power, right? A God. And then the other part is we need community. You talked about that earlier. We need people who are going to walk with us and help us through these. Because let's just say you did do it. Get to the top on your own. How great is that? If you get to the top on your own, so you got it all.
Yeah. Now what?
Yeah. How many billionaires have won it all, lost it all, or won it all and killed themselves?
That part. And then when you do it on your own, you got to maintain it on your own.
Yeah.
That's hard. I don't want that.
Then you get people who make it to the top and they bring people.
Yeah.
Hey, let's all join in and do this, and you watch the success level and the camaraderie. A great example of that from a conservative side has been a Daily Wire.
Yeah.
Here, look at those guys, Candace Owens, the Ben Shapiro's, all pulling together. They could have all been successful apart. Yeah. But pulling together, camaraderie, and not only that, but now their impact's bigger, their outreach is bigger, their impact is bigger, and they got each other's backs. Yeah. Hey, you attack Candace, Ben's got her back. You attack Ben, and there's something about the community of coming together and having that camaraderie. So I really think that if we had more of that vision. Yep. Let's do it together. Not I'm going to do it or I'm empowered. Right. The truth is you can only do so much anyways, right? I mean, you can say just do it, but I'm not going to be Michael Jordan. Oh, like I watched the guy, or you got to have, he's got freakish hands. How many people have you ever seen be able to grab a ball and do what he does on the fly? And one of my favorite things to watch lately has been watching these young guys who come up LeBron lovers, and then they watch like Michael Jordan highlight video that's out there, and they post their reactions to it. Yeah, because they're all like, LeBron's the best, he's great, and there's no doubt that he's a good ball player. Nobody's going to deny that. Right. Is he top 5 for sure? Yeah. But then they all go and they watch Jordan, and they're like, this guy is unreal. He wasn't human. And how can somebody hang like that? Everybody jumped up and they're down, and he's still in the air. Yeah. And you're like, that was so unique. I mean, you look at Albert Pujols being a St. Louis person. Yeah. What he did those first 11 years when home runs, I mean, that was unreal. He was hitting over 40 home runs 11 years in a row. Yeah. Not even Mike Trout's done that. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it really is. They're unhuman abilities. And to think that I can do that, well, you could be a ball player. Yeah. my co-host, if he was here today, played baseball for the Dodgers. He had the ability, but his dad was the better player. But he looked more the part.
Yeah.
So that also tells you got to have ability plus talent plus drive.
Yes.
If he were to tell you the difference between him and his dad, I think he would say that his dad was very driven. And Scott was driven, but I would say that he would say that his dad was probably a little more driven.
Yeah.
And so like you look at different things. So you got to have the drive, but you also got to have the talent. You can have drive and no talent, and you're not going to get anywhere, right?
That's it. Where you going?
Yeah.
Don't matter.
Yeah. And you can have talent. If you don't have drive, you won't ever make it as far as you could have.
Yep.
So God's got to have some God-given abilities and talents to be able to do it. But getting back to you, I don't want to. We're getting off. I love how we can go on rabbit trails all day long with conservatism, but we're here about you, Jessica. So the school board. Where do you go from here? We know that your radio show is closed. Is that your focus for the next few years? And
it is for now until God says, "Hey, we're doing something different."
Yeah.
I'm trying to be quiet and listen. I do miss the show. We talked about, there's a book I want to write. The story, it's like God gave me this story, this wild story, and somebody needs it. There's some people that need to see. You were brought up in a space very similar to me. And if God can work through you, like, why not me? Like, there's a story of hope and triumph. So I need to get the book started ASAP. It's been heavy on me, and I need to make that happen. But for now, I got 2 teenage girls. Like, that's full time. I work full time, the board. So my plate is pretty full. But there's
but you're getting by, and you're. I mean, sometimes the best thing to do is just doing what we're talking about, being a mom.
Yeah.
That is an awesome thing, right?
Yes.
We've kind of made that into this bad word almost. And being a mom is.
That's my most fulfilling job right now.
Yeah, I feel the same way about my wife.
Yes, watching them grow. And you talk about the dynamics, the masculinity. I got 2 girls. And I have to check myself sometimes. Like, I have to check myself that I'm showing them too much of the masculinity. Like, I hustle a lot. Like, I am playing both roles. I am the provider and the nurturer, but I don't want them to be me. I want them to have my resilience, but I don't want them to have my aggression and my masculinity. Like, I want them to be girls. Like, I want them to tap into that femininity. So I'm intentionally trying to be more soft with them and just get them in the kitchen, and I want them to be good wives. So
yeah,
I'm like, okay, God, like what are we doing? Because I've lived this journey, and I don't think they were young when I was in that role as a wife, and so my newest lesson is, how do I teach that alone? Not that I will always be alone, but how do I don't want them to be. Right now, I run the show.
Yeah. Hopefully you got a community that can help step up. That's. I meet with, I've got a couple of the young middle schoolers that I'm trying to meet with fairly regular because they don't have dads in their homes. And so I try to, do a lunch or dinner with them every now and then and get a chance to talk to them and get a feel for things and ask them those questions. Even if their dad's still in their lives, a lot of times they are, but they start to realize, like, my dad's not necessarily who I thought he was.
Yeah.
Or maybe my mom is.
Hard. Yeah.
And so but who do they tell? They can't talk to anybody.
I know.
They got to have somebody to talk to and have this conversation. So I think it's really good that you're trying to do that. When people ask me, I always say that's why we have a community of believers. Yeah. Go find a community. Go find somebody look for somebody older than you who models what you want to be.
Yes. Yes, that's good. I need to do that.
I'd love to say that I took that, I came up with that, but I'll tell you what, when I was in the early 2000s, I was young, married. I was going through this big business fiasco. I had a partner who was taking me for about $100,000 and tried to steal my company. Well, he actually did steal the company, but that's not getting into my story. But we had this huge thing. And in the middle of that, I called the guy and I said, man, and it was the first time I'd been a youth pastor. I'd ridden this really nice wave of life, right? My struggles had been pretty minimum personally. I'd had some travesties, but personally had not really dealt with a lot of massive stuff. And depression was probably so far off from a horizon for me. And all of a sudden I felt myself in valleys. And I didn't feel like God was necessarily there. And he said, man, I'm just going to tell you, go seek out some whiteheads in your church, take their wisdom, apply it, test it against God's word, and you'll know how to take those steps. And after that, I started really seeking out those guys. And then I started going, man, these guys have marriages that I want to be like, which,
Yes.
kind of showed me the reflections of my own marriage and some of the things that I'd taken in. My dad was a great dad, but some of the flaws that he learned from his dad that I'd picked up and that brought into our marriage and had to deal with. And so, I think that, some good advice for anybody is go find those older women in the church and who are married and model the kind of marriage that you want to see, and get yourself and your kids underneath their tutelage, and it could be something as simple as hanging out once a month or hanging out every we've got some guys in our church that take my boys every now and then.
Yeah.
And they're like, I have neighbors that'll be like, what? And I'm like, yeah, they're Sunday school teachers, come and pick them up, and they go do an adventure with them, and they're like, who does that? And I go, well, I think it's, you need to be intentional about that. And I like to create those opportunities because they model good marriages, and because there's some things that maybe these guys can teach them that I just haven't lived, or I haven't gone through, and they're farther along, and I want my kids to experience. So
that's the power of community. I need
community. Yeah. Get them.
I can't be every example. Not in one person. That sounds exhausting. I don't even want to try that. Yeah.
That is exhausting.
It is. It is.
You can't do it on your own.
Yeah. I like it.
All right. Well, let's end with that. I think that we is that a good spot to end?
It's good.
Okay.
You always got access to me. I'll come back.
All right. And we got, do you still do your podcast?
So I have the one, Thriving in Relationships After Abuse. So that one's still there, talking about, how you rebuild yourself and actually thrive and not take that trauma into the next situation. So I think it's Apple, Spotify, all of that. You search Thriving in Relationships After Abuse.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the show notes, and they can check it out, and we'll put a link to it, and they can get into it. And then if you write your book, we'll definitely get you back. We'll have to do a promotion on it and get the word out. So, but and if you go back to radio one day, we'll have to. You never know where God's got it.
You never know.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it, whatever it is. I'm just like, all right, what are we doing today?
Well, right now, take the relaxing ride that you're in. You're not a little bit less controversy at the moment, so you get to just enjoy being a mom. Yeah. And we'll get you back. We'll have to talk about the school board stuff sometime, just all the pressure that was on behind those decisions that you and I talked about before. There's a lot there that I'm sure we can unpack in an episode.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
All righty. Well, hey, thanks for checking us out today for Triple Play. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Scotty apparently got caught at an appointment and never got in here, so I don't know. He's our missing co-host today, but we love him anyways.
Yes,
anyways, we'll catch you later. Take care. God bless. Thank you.